Maddie, focus. It's recap time.
A la Boo Boo F1 crossover.
No. Hello and welcome to 17th One. My name is Julia. I know a lot about F1.
My name is La Boo Boo, and I know varying increments of F1 depending on the day. It can be 100 or it can be -5.
Last weekend was the Spanish Grand Prix, which means it is officially recap time. This is our post-race recap series, Champions and Crash Outs, where we evaluate who had a great weekend and who perhaps was crashing out over it. Maddie, do you want to kick us off? Who do you think was a champion last weekend?
I think our biggest and foremost champion was Nico Hülkenberg. Never in my wildest years of being an F1 fan. Yep, that's right. My whole half year did I think I was going to watch a Sauber pass a Ferrari.
A lot of things went right for Nico during that race. And, I'm glad he did. I'm glad he slid right past Lewis at the end there. Because I feel like that really just put a neat little bow on the otherwise chaotic race.
Apart from Nico Hülkenberg, we also have the usual Oscar. He got pole. He was the pole sitter.
Some might say.
Might say, who knows. And he managed to hold that position. He had great pacing. He did very well. And honestly, I must say there is something about him this year where he just not to say that none of the other drivers have it. Obviously they do. But he has that drive and there's that fire and that want to compete and do the best that he can. And if anyone who has competed in any sport, I think you would understand, you just look at someone and you're like, there's something there that this is their year or this is their moment.
I agree. He's been absolutely acing it. And he does seem to have I feel like something in him really changed after Australia. And he's not that he wasn't dedicated before Australia, but I feel like that was almost necessary for him, to light a certain fire. And he has not really. I mean, he's had little moments, but he's been very, very on top of things since then. So great job to Oscar. I will say during qualifying, I don't know if you caught it, but there was that really funny moment in Q3 where he went out for his lap first. And then as he was finishing his lap, Lando was starting his. And so the race engineer, warned Oscar, Lando's coming up behind you. And Lando was obviously trying to get a toe off of Oscar. Get a little bit of a boost in speed, as anybody would do off of anybody that's, in the right position. But obviously, and Lando said this afterwards as well, he was like, it was probably really unlucky that it was Oscar because Oscar moved out of the way. He was like, nope, not today.
No, bestie.
And he had that little radio message. He was like, cheeky. So they're having fun with each other. And I thought that was really funny. And then, Oscar went out on his second run and did an absolutely mega lap. So
our next champion is the same color as my nails. I'm just going to show you like this because I don't want to accidentally flash any of you the middle finger and get canceled. Well, your nails aren't red. It is the man, the myth, the one who wears red but sometimes chooses to wear a suit that closely resembles Williams because he just wants to feel his soul connection with Carlos again. Charles Leclerc. He did so much better. I'll say it. He did better than I thought he was going to. I thought he had used up all his luck in Monaco, and he did amazing. And he managed to move from fourth to third, where he had been sitting for a lot of the race. And he got that third place podium. So shout out to Charles Leclerc.
Pew, pew, pew. I would like to put it on the record that I never doubted Mr. Charles Leclerc for a single moment. I thought that he was going to be on the podium this weekend, and I was right. But yes, great weekend from Charles. I mean, I will say I was one of those people doubting on Saturday after qualifying, and they only let him go out for one run in Q3. It was kind of in the middle of the session, and I was like, what is he doing? Why is he not in the car? There's still 5 minutes left. What's going on? And just watching him kind of like go down in the places. But it turned out that strategy was all Mr. Charles Leclerc's is himself, so that they could reserve an extra set of tires, I believe. And you know what? It worked out for him come Sunday. So hats off to the guy.
I do believe that is all that we have on our champions list. We are now going to move over to our crash outs. And I think if anyone who watched it could equally say the biggest crash out of them all was unfortunately our Dutch king, Max Verstappen. He started out well. He was able to hold that second place until Lando overtook him, but he was still holding that third place. And unfortunately, with the strategy that Red Bull made, it just did not end up working out well, especially when the safety car came. And the strategy they pulled ended up being more detrimental to his race than it did helpful.
I will say, up until that moment, they were on a 3-stop strategy, which was working shockingly well. It was almost working too well. It was like the universe was like, actually, there's no way that could be working that well. I need to take you guys down a peg. Again, strategy was working shockingly well up until little Kimmy. We'll get to him later. Put out the safety car. And then he was put on those hard tires. And I was seeing some discussion about that. Max did ask, and he said that, it seemed like it would be more beneficial if they had fresh tires to go onto. So Red Bull brought him in for fresh tires, but they didn't tell Max that the only fresh tires they had were the hard ones, which was, nobody had run them in the race because they were terrible. And then they proved to be terrible. At the restart, he had a little squirrely whirly moment that really let Charles catch up to him. And then those two had a little, an incident, as Charles was calling it afterwards. And as the FIA stewards called it as well, they said, nobody was primarily at fault. They were both trying to go onto the racing line, and they were both trying to catch a slipstream from Lando. And as a result, they knocked wheels. Obviously, Max wasn't super happy about that. Charles himself said that, he wouldn't have been happy if he was in Max's shoes either. Because those two understand each other in a way a few men can. And then, George came up besides Max, lost control, touched Max, forced him off the side of the track. That, I think, was ultimately deemed an incident. You can have your own opinion on whether it should have been or not. Max was told to give the position back again. Obviously very upset about that. Seemingly slows down to give the position back. And then there was contact. I will say, maybe it's just because I have a law background, but it's always, innocent until proven guilty. If there's no concrete proof that he did it on purpose, then you can't assume that he did.
My opinion is that if you are a reporter, kind of like following the innocent proven guilty, or unless you have hard, cold facts, like, you should be partial to what you're witnessing. Obviously, you got to ask questions and stuff, but there are some interviewers that I was watching or I saw, and the questions that they were asking and the way that they were pushing made it feel like they had picked their side and it wasn't Max's. Not that they have to pick Max's side. Like,
think of the children, Maddie.
Think of the children. I'm tired of children. Yeah, like, they don't have to be on Max's side. I just think they should have been more partial than it felt like they were appearing to be. That's my opinion. I also think it's like, I understand Red Bull not wanting to take a risk of getting a penalty, but it is a little unfortunate that Max had to give up a position and the stewards ended up coming out and saying, "Oh, there's no further incident." And so he would have been fine. So I do believe that Red Bull, I understand strategy, but I do think Red Bull jumped the gun on that one a little bit. Um and they maybe could have waited, but maybe not because they were getting
Yeah.
down on the last few laps.
Yeah, I think they really didn't want to risk a 5 to 10 second penalty, which, I mean, obviously
Yeah.
he ended up getting anyway, especially with everybody bunched so close after the safety car. It means a lot more at that stage in the race than it would earlier. Um, yeah, I think that, again, I think that people can have whatever opinion they want to have about what the incident looked like. Again, for me, I think there's too many factors there. I mean, we know that he was frustrated. We know that his tires had zero grip. And we know that he was desperate to make that back in a position. And I think that led to a bad judgment call. But a bad judgment call doesn't necessarily mean intention to hit somebody. It just means a bad judgment call. Which is kind of what Max said in his, Instagram post. He was like, shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
That's
It's
it.
literally the equivalent of like, oh, if you're driving and you think you can make a yellow light and it turns red in the middle of it, it just wasn't the safest judgment call. That probably shouldn't have happened. You probably should have slowed down, but just wasn't a good judgment call.
You didn't intend to do it, but you still did something
Exactly. Like
stupid.
the only difference with Max Verstappen is that he's like the WDC, he's a celebrity in the F1 world. He's held to higher standards, but like let's be real, everyone makes poor judgment calls in their life. Like that's part of being human.
I do appreciate people being like, I don't know what you're talking about. I've always known Max was like this. And that's why I stand by him. I'm like, so true as well though. Like,
I was gonna say, in the words of in the words of Charles Leclerc, it's like this.
it's like this, man. Like, I don't know. And I think as well, like, over the past season and a half, like past year maybe, I feel like we've seen Max's image kind of like shifting in the public perception, where people are like seeing more of him off track and they're like, oh my god, he's like a father now. And they've like been able to see him like fight for the championship last year. And so we have like these waves where people are like, oh my God, he's like, deserving of that title. Like after Imola, people were like, this is why he's the 4-time champion. And I'm like, y'all forget things so quickly. Like you guys forget the entire end of last year where you were like bitching about him and his like wheel to wheel capabilities and him being a menace, running Lando off track, hitting people, etc. You forget about all these complaints that you had just because of like one good weekend, and then you're shocked when he goes back to just being exactly the person that he is.
Like on top of having to drive really fast and deal with G-force and possibly getting very injured in a sport, they also have to deal with haters. But also, Max seems to do very well with just being like, okay, you don't like me? Staffu. I don't like you either. I don't know you. So, I mean, he's got a stronger shell than I do, so.
Moving on from Max and his crash out of epic proportions. Lock him up. He did it all. I stand by him anyway. We had a couple of other crash outs this weekend who ended up being a bit overlooked because of Max's crash out of massive proportions. Yes, Maddie.
Before Julia continues with any of the racers, I'm going to name someone who we have never mentioned until now on this crash out list, and that is Toto Wolff. Because he had to watch his poor children. He had to tell one child to lock the F in because
moving and braking today. What's going on?
Hard to concentrate.
Because he is 27 years old and is the lead driver. And 2, he had to watch his other little Kimchi slowly stall out in the race again.
Toto was just not having a great time with it. They started out the year so strong too. And now they've been passed in the standings by Ferrari, which is honestly a little embarrassing considering Ferrari had a double DQ this year.
And I don't even know what's worse of like if it's the drivers, which it clearly is not, because this is Kimmy's second time where the car just quit. Um and so it's very obviously a car problem that, like you said, who knows what is happening, but all we know is, in the words of Toto Wolff, suffering.
What do you take away from these last 3 races?
Suffering.
I
Suffering.
saw somebody say, they were like, well, if these Mercedes engines keep crapping themselves, can't, because McLaren runs the Mercedes engines. So they're like, isn't it about time we have a McLaren engine failure? And I'm like, you know what? That would spice things up quite a bit. But alas, it's not happened yet.
Yes. So it's been rough for Toto Wolff and Mercedes. Rough for our little Kimchi. Like, it wasn't at Monaco. This is the second time his car has just quit on him. Like, come on, Mercedes car. Why are you doing our little Kimmy Kimchi dirty? He did nothing wrong. He's just a baby.
He's just a kid.
He's just a kid.
Another rough weekend for Alex Albon. For both of the Williams, honestly. I mean, Carlos did not have the run in front of his home crowd that he would have liked to have had. Alex got bodied the whole race. He also committed some crimes. I mean, he picked up a penalty that he had to serve before he was allowed to retire. Not a good weekend. Yes, Maddie.
Speaking of home races, we just made a crime. I am so sorry, everyone. We have to go back to our champions real quick, because despite Carlos not doing well, a certain 43-year-old man named Fernando Alonso, who is apparently the world's unluckiest guy, is on the champion list because he got points this race.
Hell yeah, he did.
I can't believe we forgot that.
I'm so proud of little Nando. I'm glad he had a good race. It was more, what is it called? It was his time. It was his time to have a good race.
Okay, you say it like it was his time before you say that, and you're like, he's not dying, Julia. Don't say that.
No. It was, I'm blanking on the specific phrase that I need here, and that's gonna kill me later.
Delayed gratification?
No.
It was his time. He's dying.
It was about time. I'll leave it at that.
Better phrasing.
Another crash out of the weekend. I am going to put Franco Colapinto on this list, not because he did particularly bad, but because he didn't do particularly well. His car kind of broke down in the pit lane during qualifying, kind of screwed some other people over. And then his race just wasn't, phenomenal. I don't really think he managed to make up a whole lot of places. And that's crucial because he has 2 more races to prove himself now, and it's not looking good.
On top of following Colapinto, who was actually behind him and had to give him a little push in the qualifying lane during that, is Lewis Hamilton. He even stated it himself. It was not a good race. Not only did he get passed by a Sauber, but he didn't feel like he had the flow, and he ended up being way below. And in a lot of his interviews, he really was not happy with how it went, unfortunately.
It's not been a dream start to life at Ferrari for Lewis, but I will say, I feel like it has been a typically Ferrari start to life at Ferrari for Lewis. This is pretty much exactly what I had expected going into this year. And I actually met up with my friend like 2 weeks ago. And Lewis is who he would say is his favorite driver. And he was very much looking forward to seeing him in Ferrari. And I always told him, like, I have the utmost faith in Lewis. I have very little faith in Ferrari. And he told me when I saw him that I was fully allowed to say, I told you so. And I did. So that was nice, actually. Thank you, Ferrari, for that. And I do hope that it gets better. I do, at the end of the day, I believe in Ferrari's ability to improve.
They gotta start improving quickly, because we're already halfway through the racing season.
Yeah. I would like to put a dishonorable mention on this list for the FIA's technical directives. As we all know, going into this weekend, we saw some new front wing regulations coming in, reducing the amount of flex that they were allowed to have, and people really hyped these up. And they were like, things are really gonna change for us. Specifically, Ferrari was really convinced things were gonna change for them. Nothing changed. We had the same pecking order as we did before. I honestly didn't expect much to change, but it would have been fun if it had.
I mean, God forbid a girly have hopes and dreams of it changing things up. Don't worry, Ferrari. I got you right now. For now.
All right. And I think that brings us to the end of our champions and crash outs. Anything to add?
Brain is mush.
Excellent. We've done our job. Let us know what you think were the champions and the crash outs of the Spanish Grand Prix. And we will see you at Montreal. Bye.